Hey YouTube, this is another Dating Chronicles video. Like, I've been having so many memories lately. This was probably, this is 2021, probably 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, at least 6 or 7 years ago. I met this guy, and I don't mean to laugh, but these stories, y'all. If you could relate to any of these videos I've done, just like let me know. Share your own stories. And at the time, it wasn't funny, but in hindsight, it's just like it's funny in a sad way that people are the way that they are. So I met this guy, and we had went out on quite a few dates. We were hanging out for, I'll say, a couple months. He had been to my apartment. We were at the kissing stage. You know, no petting, no heavy petting, no underclothes, anything, no touching each other anywhere except like on our face and on our neck, and we would hug and kiss. We had not been sexually intimate. We would go to places like flea markets, county fairs. We went to a concert. We went to the movies. We would go out to eat. I mean, so we were like every weekend, like we were hanging out for like 2 months. And so I had asked him, and to me, it felt like we were dating. Anytime you're seeing somebody every weekend and it's going on like 2 months or more, to me, it's feeling like we're dating. And then we're kissing. Like, I don't kiss everybody. And when we were at the one of the festivals, he had put his hand, while we were walking, he put his hand in my back pocket. And I'm like, is he trying to grab my ass? But he had just put his hand in my pocket. Like, instead of holding hands or putting his hand around my waist, he had put his hand in my back pocket. And so we're just walking, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this dude doing? Because nobody's ever really done that to me that I remember. Probably when I was a teenager and they were just trying to squeeze my ass. But he wasn't, like, filling me up or anything. It was just, you know, his hand in my pocket. So I'm just like, okay, that's kind of intimate. Anyway. And so I invited him. I asked him one time, I said, what do you consider us to be? And he was like, what do you mean? I said, well, do you consider us to be dating or to be in a relationship? Like, what, where do you view us? And he says, well, you know, we're just hanging out. I said, okay. I said, what's your I said, how do you differentiate hanging out between dating and between relationship? He said something like he doesn't consider himself dating someone unless they have an actual conversation and decide together that they're dating. I said, okay. And I said, well, how do you determine if you're in a relationship with someone? And he says, oh, if I'm having sex with someone, we're in a relationship. So I said, okay, so you consider us hanging out because we haven't had a conversation to determine we're dating, and we're not in a relationship because we haven't had sex. He was like, yeah. I said, okay. So that next weekend, I invited him to, it was a holiday coming up. And my family has get-togethers on most holidays. And so I invited him to come. Because at this point, now we're almost at like 3 months. And we're hanging out still every weekend. And so I asked him, I said, my family's having a barbecue. And so And so I wanted to invite you to come. If you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. Just let me know. It's not a big deal. But if you do want to come, that's fine too. And he says, oh, well, where is it? And I said, well, it's in New Jersey. And he was like, oh. And then he said, well, how would you introduce me? And I felt like it was a trick question. I said, I would just introduce you. We'll use the name Mark. I honestly don't remember what his name was. I said, I would say, hey, this is Mark. And he was like, oh, just Mark? And then he said, well, what if they asked you who Mark was? I said, well, which my family, they don't ask stuff like that. They really don't. And he said, well, what if they were to say, who's Mark? I would say, oh, Mark's my friend. And he was like, oh, your friend Mark. And I said, yeah. And then he got real quiet, and I'm thinking, what what's going on? My dating chronicles is like the Twilight Zone. It's just like, like, I don't understand. And then he was like, well, why would you just say like your friend Mark? Why not your special friend Mark? And then I didn't understand the question. I'm not the brightest bulb in the pack. And sometimes I am a little slow, but I'm not stupid. But that just did not make sense to me. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he's like, why wouldn't you introduce me as your special friend Mark? I said, you told me last weekend that we were just hanging out, that we were not dating, and that we were not in a relationship. So if we're hanging out, we're just friends, right? And he got quiet again. And I'm just like, what the heck? And so he's driving, he's in his zone, and I'm just looking out the passenger window, just thinking like, I don't understand. I don't understand what's happening. Like, I don't understand even like where his mindset is. And so as we got closer to my apartment for him to drop me off, he says something like, oh, well, I'll just see you later. And this entire time, you know, he would come over, open my car door, let me out. He would hug me, give me a kiss, and then we would part ways. So he just like pulled up and just stopped the vehicle, and I'm sitting there. And I said, you not going to open my door like you've done since I've met you? So he's like, and so he gets out and opens the car door. And then I get out, he goes to walk away, and I'm like, and no kiss like usual? So he comes over, and I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you later. And he was like, maybe. And I was just like, okay. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. And so, I don't know, he lived like over an hour away. And he texted me like 20 minutes later, and I'm thinking, isn't he still driving? Like, did he pull over on the side of the road? He sent me this long text message about, I knew this wasn't going to work, and I knew that you were seeing somebody else, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? And honestly, even though I am polyamorous, I wasn't seeing anybody else. I was hanging out with him every damn weekend. And so I'm reading his message like, where is this coming from? So I wrote him back, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, we've been hanging out every weekend for like going on 3 months now. What are you talking about? Like, you knew this wasn't going to work, and you knew I was seeing somebody else. How do you know something that's not even happening? He was like, well, because you would just introduce me as your friend and not your special friend. I said, you said we weren't dating and we weren't in a relationship. Like, what was I supposed to say? Like, and it didn't even happen yet. And so he just went on, and he was saying he was going to go back to focusing on his kids. And previously he had told me, and he was like in his 60s. Previously he had told me that he let a lot of good women go because he wasn't ready to commit. And he would always choose to focus on his children. Mind you, him being in his early 60s, his children were like in their 30s. And he had grandchildren who were like teenagers. And so they didn't need him, is what I'm saying. It's not like, you know, he was paying for them to go through college or, you know, whatever. Like, they were grown on their own, had their own careers, their own houses, their own families. And so he had told me, well, I'm going to go back to focusing on my kids. And I had previously asked him, okay, why a relationship? Well, not a relationship, but why dating now after being single for like 15, 17 years? And he's like, well, I've been focusing on my kids, and now that they're grown, you know, I decided I want somebody in my life, somebody special for me, yada, 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 blah, 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 bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. So anyway, so all of that is running through my head. And now he's saying he's going to go back to focusing on his kids. And I told him, I said, you told me you let a lot of good women go because you did not want to commit. And now you're going to go back to focusing on your grown children who have their own lives, their own careers, and their own families because of how you frame dating and relationships. How is somebody supposed to introduce you if you're not dating or in a relationship? And what makes somebody a special friend versus a friend? Like, what Like that doesn't make sense to me. And so he was like really upset, and he was just so sure that I was cheating. But if we're hanging out, how is anybody cheating? I mean, the whole situation that night just did not make sense to me. And so I'm sharing all of this to say, when you meet someone who tells you something similar to that, I've let a lot of good women go, or if you're a woman, or just non-binary or gender fluid, if someone tells you I let a lot of good people go because I wasn't ready to commit, don't put too much energy into that person unless you just want to keep it real casual. Because if they're telling you that and it's been a pattern for them, chances are you might be another person mixed into that pattern, especially at his age. And some people say they can't even find a good person. And for him to have said he let a lot of good women go, like, how many did you get? Like, and why do you keep letting them go? Oh, because you didn't want to commit. And that's what he has said, because he wasn't ready to commit. And so he still didn't want to commit, but he wanted it to sound like we were committed, my special friend. But no, we're not dating, and no, we're not in a relationship. So think about the things that people say to you and pay attention to those little things. When you meet someone, you're hanging out all the time, you're doing fun things, and you're doing activities. So when they say things like that, it may not seem significant, but pay attention to it and file it away, and just keep in mind that you may just be another person in their cycle, in their pattern of behavior of not wanting to commit. And so I'm going to leave this here. If you can relate to this in any way, let me know. If you're that person who wants to be with someone, but then you don't want to commit, you want to have certain terms for whatever type of relationship it is, then don't get upset when they identify you according to your terms. And that's the bottom line here. Like, if you say you want one thing, don't be upset when you're introduced as that one thing. You know what I mean? And so be honest with yourself about what you want. Pay attention when people tell you what they want and what they don't want. And then you can decide, you know, do I want to deal with this person or not? Let's just keep it casual. So then it's not too much loss when, you know, it falls apart. So anyway, I'm going to keep this here. Let me know your thoughts below. Stay encouraged. And I do these Dating Chronicles videos just to share with you some of the different things that goes on. And that person said that. What does that mean? What might it possibly mean? Where might they be coming from? What is their possible thought process? And so these videos are just to help you try to figure some of that out. And you won't really know for sure if they're not going to tell you. But it's just something for you to think about, to try to piece things together if you want to put the energy into trying to piece things together. Dating is hard, and the older I get, the more challenging it seems to be. And I hear it from other people too that are around my age. And some of my married friends, they're like, if something happened to my spouse, I would not date. Because listening to your stories and some of my other single friend stories, they're just like, mm-mm. But I also know some older people too who are dating, and you know, they find someone and they end up in a long-term relationship, which is great. And so I'm staying hopeful and I'm staying encouraged. At the same time, you know, I'm thinking about things and paying attention to what people say and how they act. And so that's what I would like for you all to do as well. And if you're one of the people who don't want to commit, it's okay, but don't say things to other people to lead them to believe that you do. Just be honest with where you are and what you want, so that they can decide where they want to go with you, if anywhere, or keep it casual or not. And so thank you for watching this video. Leave your comments below, and you will see me in the next video.